In episode 157 of the Guitar Music Theory podcast, I answer questions about the circle of fifths, playing left-handed, Squier guitar mods, playing and singing, intervals, and more. Greetings, guitar engineers. Welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. If you're captivated by the magic of guitar music and eager to unravel the mysteries of music theory, you're in the right place. I'm Desi Cerna, your host, fellow guitar enthusiast, and author of Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Picking Mechanics, and more. In each episode of this podcast, I delve into the fascinating world of guitar and music theory, demystifying complex concepts and providing practical insights to help you become a more informed and skilled guitarist. Together, we'll explore chord progressions, scales, improvisation techniques, and more, unlocking the secrets that make guitar music an irresistible art. Today, in episode 157, I answer listener questions about the circle of fifths, playing left-handed, Squier guitar mods, playing and singing, intervals, and more. It's going to be a great discussion, but before we get started, what do you specifically need to do to become a better guitar player? Go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that's calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, lead guitar, worship music, or you want to delve deeply into music theory, I have a free course for you. I can put you on a plan to fill gaps in your knowledge so you have more fun on guitar and become a better player. Enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, episode 157 Q&A session starts in just a moment. Okay, so we are ready to dive into our first question, and it's this. Can you explain the circle of fifths and how you use it? Well, here's a definition I put together for my response. In traditional music theory, the circle of fifths organizes pitches in a sequence of perfect fifths, generally shown as a circle with the pitches and their corresponding keys in a clockwise progression. Musicians and composers often use the circle of fifths to describe the musical relationships between pitches and determine key signatures for standard notation. All right, that's the definition, but what does it mean really? So generally speaking, I don't teach the circle of fifths as a means to determine key signatures and figure out notes and chords for keys. If you're studying, fretboard theory or guitar theory for dummies, I don't really get into that type of background. I have recently done that in some Music Theory 101 Zoom classes that I've offered, just because I do get questions about this. So I thought maybe I should offer a little bit more traditional instruction on this. So I'll kind of give you a brief explanation of how the circle of fifths, why it exists and why it's used traditionally. So, and then I'll tell you practically as a guitar player what the circle of fifths means to me. So if you look at that wheel that's got all these different keys with different key signatures, that's probably what you've seen, the circle of fifths. And what it's showing you is how you have to change your key signature, that is, which notes are flat or sharp, as you create the major scale sound in different keys. So if I start in the key of C and play a major scale, so the major scale, that formula is the basis for all Western music as we know it, and we build everything off of that sound, and we combine those notes to make chords. play melodies, and then we have the minor scale that stems off of that and all the other modes and so on. So in the key of C, we have all natural notes. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. No flats or sharps. Now, if you go to C's fifth degree, G, and play through the notes of C, G to G, you almost get a major scale except for the last note. Oop, that's not right. That's an F note. I need to raise that to F sharp in order to get the right structure to have the major scale sound starting on G. And so its key signature has a sharp sign over the line that's F, indicating that all the notes need to be F sharp in order to get the major scale sound and structure and harmony if you're going to start on G. Now, if you go to G's fifth degree D and play through the notes of G, D to D, again, you almost get the major scale sound, except for that last note. Oh, there it is. That seventh needs to go up a half step. That C needs to go to C sharp. Now I've got that structure and that major scale sound for the key of D. So the key of D has an F sharp and it has a C sharp. And so on. As you go around the wheel, D's fifth degree is A. Whoop. We need a G sharp to complete that key. So now our key signature is we have F sharp, we have C sharp, we have G sharp. And so as you go around the wheel, we're always needing to add a sharp. Eventually you get to all sharps, then you need to start using some flats, and then as you make your way around the wheel, you start taking away flats in order to complete the major scale sound until you get full circle to C, and you're back to all of the natural notes. So it's really just a diagram of how that works in music, and that's necessary in order to for standard musical notation and for notating in correct keys and having correct key signatures and stuff like that. Now, we guitar players, we don't really think that way, Maybe we do if we have a background in this. Maybe we learned some piano or took a music theory class. But look, we guitar players are very pattern-oriented because we're dealing with this fretboard grid, so everything makes shapes and patterns on the fretboard. And that's actually okay. We can learn things from a music notation perspective or a piano perspective, and sometimes that's helpful or interesting, but ultimately it has to be translated into shapes and patterns on the guitar fretboard. And that's really how we guitar players typically think. It's certainly how I think. I'm very pattern-oriented. So when I started to teach music theory for guitar, I realized that, hey, this fretboard is really our battleground, and I want to focus on this. So I really focus heavily on those shapes and patterns and how things relate and connect that way. And I don't focus on traditional music theory because there was already information about that, and I wanted to create something that was kind of specifically geared towards guitar players and put them on the fast track to just understanding how things work on the fretboard and understanding how familiar guitar songs are composed. And of course, it's very successful. You can read the reviews on Amazon for fretboard theory or guitar theory for dummies, and you can see how guitar players really appreciate that and click with that. So that doesn't mean that, learning standard musical notation or traditional theory couldn't have its place. If you're like most guitar players, generally speaking, that information is just not as useful to you as like the stuff I teach in my guitar theory materials. So when I think of the circle of fifths as a guitar player, I think about fifth movement on the guitar. As we went from key to key, we started in C, and we went to its fifth degree G. So a C chord to a G chord is a fifth. And if I go to G's fifth degree, that puts me on D. So G to D is a fifth. And if I go to D's fifth degree, that puts me on A. And if I go to A's fifth degree, that puts me on E. So I just played 5 major chords here. And these chords are actually used in Hey Joe. You're probably familiar with the Jimi Hendrix version. So that's C, G, D, A, E. So great song, great chord progression there. But if you broke this down and tried to figure out what key is this in, well, these chords don't all fit into one key. There isn't a key or major scale that has 5 major chords. There's only 3 major chords in a key, 1, 4, and 5. So what's happening here? Is this modal interchange? Is this a combination of parallel scales? Is it, harmonic minor or blah, blah, blah? This is based on 5th movement. I've got a YouTube video about this. You can just search my name, Desi Cerna. What is a circle progression? And I talk about how sometimes songs don't stick in a key, but the reason why they make sense is because they're based on 5th movement, which is an important type of movement in music. So I went into more depth on this topic and some other related topics in a recent Zoom class called Music Theory 101. So if you're someone that is interested in this and maybe you've studied guitar theory, but you want to kind of fill in the blanks with a little bit more traditional information, just because you find it interesting or to help you connect the dots, or maybe you play another instrument or you know how to read music and you want to put it all together, just shoot me an email and let me know that you're interested, and I do plan on offering those Zoom classes again. We are moving on. And next, I just want to share some feedback. So recently, I answered a question about creating left-handed guitar instruction, and I just said that I didn't think that I was really cut out to do that, and I didn't think it was economically viable because there's so few left-handed guitarists, and I just didn't think it would be worth the amount of work I would put into it. I don't think I would see a return on that investment. So I had a podcast listener that responded to that, and here's his response. He says, "Hi, Desi. Listening to your podcast just now, and in particular, your response to the question about resources for left-handed guitarists. I'm a lefty who plays left-handed on left-handed guitars. It may interest you to know my personal experience is that even though chord charts, for instance, are the wrong way around, what happens in practice is that after a while, looking at right-handed chord charts on paper, my brain automatically does the conversion to left-handed chord shapes, so it becomes more or less automatic. Sometimes I find if it's an unfamiliar chord or riff that I may have to actively think about the fingering position, but I imagine that's probably also the case for right-handed guitarists sometimes. As it happens, a couple of years ago, my son bought me a left-handed chord book, which I thought would be really useful, but to my surprise, I actually found it more difficult than reading right-handed chord shapes, presumably because my brain is now so used to doing the conversion from right to left for me. The brain works in mysterious ways. And by far the much bigger challenge is going into a guitar shop full of gorgeous new instruments and being lucky enough to find one left-handed guitar amongst all the righties. I recently visited my local big box guitar store with the intention of trying and buying a new Fender Strat, only to find that they had no lefty Strats. I sadly left empty-handed. Of course, it's similarly impossible to pick up a friend's righty guitar and play it. You can see why Mr. Hendrix ended up playing right-handed guitars and restringing them. By the way, I completely understand the commercial aspects of it not being economically viable to produce left-only resources, although roughly 10% of the population are left-handed, so it's a higher proportion than you might think. Hope this might be of some interest, and thanks for everything you do. It's worth every penny and is helping me enormously. Kind regards, John from Manchester, England." John, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for sharing your thoughts there. That was fantastic, and it just adds more insight. So, I didn't really think about it that way, that maybe the reason why there isn't much interest in left-only materials is because a lot of left-handed people are so used to just doing the conversions and just switching things around themselves, so that maybe in some cases, as is the case here for John, it's actually more difficult for them to see something on a left-handed chart because they're so used to seeing it the other way. Well, I mean, what's good about this is that there's really no excuses whether you're right-handed or left-handed. You know what? The brain does work in magnificent ways, and you can make the conversion, and you can learn, and you can make use of whatever resources are available to you. So play. And something I don't think I may have mentioned before is that it's kind of strange that we have right-handed and left-handed guitars. They don't make right-handed and left-handed pianos. Like either way, it's still two hands, And I think for a lot of people when they pick up a guitar, since the emphasis seems to be mostly on fingering on the fretboard, it feels odd for them to do that with their left hand if they're right-handed. Typically, if you give a guitar to someone who doesn't have any experience, they want to, if they're right hand dominant, they want to put their right hand on the fretboard and do all that, play Twister with their fingers with their right hand. It doesn't make sense that they would do it with their left hand. Now, some people would say, yeah, but with traditional guitar and classical guitar technique, the right hand is plucking the strings, and there's more control. There's more control with the right hand. Yeah. Maybe, but either way, I mean, I don't know. When we watch guitar players play and they're shredding, we're watching their fretting hand, which for most right-handed players is the left hand. Isn't that interesting? So I don't know if it really would make much difference if you play one way or the other. I think that people just have to go with what feels right for them, and ultimately you get used to it. I know that there are a lot of famous guitar players who are left-handed and they just played right-handed. I think B.B. King is one of them. Because again, either way, it's two hands. If I have any listeners that has any opinions on that and you want to share your insights, head to the website, scroll down, hit the contact link, and send me a message. We have another comment in regard to something I discussed in a previous podcast episode. Jeremy says, I played Guitar Hero for fun, then went to play my guitar, and that game messed up my coordination so badly I had to reinstill my core skills in order to play correctly. My advice, don't do it to yourself. So I had answered some questions about playing Guitar Hero or some of these other games that are either games to be fun or they claim to actually teach you how to play guitar where you're watching a screen and following, a bouncing ball or something and coordinating your hands to it. And my answer was, if you want to play guitar, play guitar. If you enjoy playing those games, then I don't want to spoil your fun. You can play those games, but those games and those methods that try to use similar graphics and stuff, but claim to actually teach you how to play guitar, it's not the same as just picking up your guitar and just playing your guitar. So if you want to play guitar, play guitar. But I hadn't considered this, that Jeremy says that it actually messed up his coordination, and he felt like it interfered with his ability to play guitar. So that's interesting. Hadn't thought about that. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. This next question is about guitars and investing in a Squier Strat or buying a PRS guitar. And he says, so I have a Squier Strat that's 15 plus years old. It was used when I got it and it wasn't tunable. It now has Godot tuners, a bone nut, and Fender Texas Special pickups. A local store messed up the nut and I have to play it with a slightly concaved neck. I have been looking at Paul Reed Smith guitars and noticed you have several. My question is, should I fix my little Squier, or would you recommend a good starter PRS like the SE Custom? There's a used standard I could pick up, or is it worth putting another $150 into my Squier Strat? The store apparently messed it up, but they won't fix it, he says. So here's the deal. It depends on the Squier. I would have to see it. Is it a really, really cheap one? Because some of those Squiers are actually decent. This one's 15 plus years old. Hard to tell. Maybe the first thing I should say regarding this is that when people think about investing money in an instrument, they almost always focus on whether or not they'll get a return on their investment. I don't think that way. I think about, can I put money into an instrument to fix it up so that I'll be happy and satisfied with it, and then I'll want to hang on to it for a long period of time and play it a lot. I don't think about whether or not I have put money into it so that its value is beyond what I could ever sell it for. But some people are really sensitive about that because everything is coming and going, and everything's about a deal, and everything's about what they're going to get out of it someday. So you'll have to make a decision about what is your goal here. Do you want to sell that guitar, and are you going to try to get your money back? It sounds like I don't think you could ever get your money back just from the work you've already put into it. If you generally like the guitar and you think that the guitar's construction is good, and that getting a new nut put on you'd be happy with the guitar and its feel and its sound, and it's something that you would play, well then, okay, for $150, if that's what it's going to take, you can have a Stratocaster that you may be very satisfied with and will serve you well for a long time. And who cares whether or not you get your money out of it? You're going to get your money out of it by keeping it and playing it and enjoying it. Now, how does that compare to a PRS? I'm not sure because I can't see that Squier Strat. But the PRS guitars, even their kind of budget line, the SE line, are very good. The build quality on it is very good. And they usually sound really good. You could also swap pickups out on them. They cut corners on the pickups sometimes, and sometimes people like to get an SE model and then try some fancier pickups, and they often can be very satisfied with the sound, and they have a guitar that looks good and plays good and stuff. So you can't go wrong with a PRS. Now, they're different guitars. So, a Stratocaster's got the 3 single coil guitars. They're true single coils. PRS, the SE Custom has got humbuckers. You can split them, which is kind of nice, but it's not the same as a Strat. So you might consider, if you like that Strat enough, put some money into it, fix it up. Now you've got a good, true single-coil guitar. Get a PRS guitar that's got some humbuckers, and you can cover a lot of ground with those two different types of pickups. So that's my take. I have some guitars here that I put money into, including I have a Squier Classic Vibe Telecaster that I had overhauled, and I had all the electronics replaced and much of the hardware replaced and had some work done on it. I had posted a video on this on YouTube. I ended up making it private because I was so sick of all the people leaving negative comments saying, that's a waste of money. You just put $500 into a $400 guitar. What an idiot. But here's the deal. Am I going to be able to sell this and get what I put out of it? No, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was, I want to turn this into a guitar that I love and like, and I do. And so I've been using it. The upgrades that I made to it significantly improved the sound, and I've used that. I just completed a recording project with this, and it sounded fantastic. And so I got my money's worth out of it, because for the amount that I put into it, it's worth it because I got a guitar that, I love. And I have some other instruments. I'm looking at a Squier 5-string jazz bass that I put some money into and fixed some things up. I'll never get my money out of that, but it doesn't matter. I'm hanging on to it. It works for me. And I've swapped pickups on many of my guitars and done some other things. So my thing is it worth putting money into something so that I will like a guitar? And you know what? I have put money into some things and it didn't work out, and I had to sell it and take a loss. And I'm okay with that because it was still worth it, because, we're always chasing tone. We're always trying to turn something into something that we can love. And if I have to spend a little bit of money in order to get there and figure out what works best for me, so be it. And we are moving on to our next question. This comes from Bob, and he says, do the books match the chapters in the video course? I just bought Fretboard Theory, loving it. Will they match up so I can practice along with and without video? Thanks, Bob. Okay, so he bought the Fretboard Theory books. They're sold on Amazon, the actual printed and bound books. But then on my website, I have the Fretboard Theory Video Pro Pack, which is the full-blown video version. And it's the same material. It follows the same outline. We got Fretboard Theory Volume 1 and Volume 2, just like the books. I go through each topic chapter by chapter, just like the books. However, I do, written instruction and video presentation are different. I do present things differently in the video. I don't just follow the text exactly in the chapter. I do things a little bit differently. But you can definitely use them together. You can read the book, and there's some diagrams in the book that are useful, but you're also going to see them in the video. And, it's different when you're trying to describe something in text and then when you have an opportunity to actually see and hear something in action, which I do in the video. So the answer is they do follow each other, but not exactly word for word. I don't go through the books and say, now we're looking at figure 1. Now we're looking at figure 2. Now we're turning the page. I don't do that. Next, Alan says, hi, loving the lesson so far. What do you find is the easiest way to learn lyrics? Well, I never found an easy way to learn lyrics. I would just have to repeat things over and over until I had them memorized. And actually, I would practice things kind of line by line until it became more of a muscle memory thing and I wasn't even thinking about it. So, there are songs that I've heard my whole life. I've probably heard them 1,000 times, and I can hum the guitar parts, and I know the drum beats, and I know what the bass line is doing. And you would ask me, "Hey, can you sing that song?" And I would start singing the lyrics, and I might know a word or two, and I just go blank. And it's because just the way my brain is wired, I always would key in on the instrumentation to music. I listen to the vocals, but I hear it more like an instrument. So I hear its melody, and I don't always dwell on the lyrics, which is not the way most people hear music. Particularly people who aren't musicians, they really key in on the lyrics. That's the whole focal point, for most people. I know that in my family, those that don't play instruments and stuff, sometimes, I would play parts of a song and they wouldn't even recognize it until I started playing, like I would sing it. And they'd be like, oh yeah, of course, that song. Whereas for me, I can hear parts of a song. Could be a beat, could be a part of a bass line, could be, a riff or something going on underneath the lyrics, part of the instrumentation. And that's what I recognize, I can listen to one song and say, that's the same beat as this song, or that bass line is similar to this song, Anyway, all that to say, learning lyrics and memorizing them was actually very difficult for me. But I did play in bands for years where I had to learn lyrics. I had to sing backups or I had to sing songs. And then I did acoustic gigs and stuff like that, solo, and learned hundreds of songs and learned how to sing them. And I just had to go through and just, so for example, if I'm learning Take It Easy by the Eagles, well, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load. I've got 7 women on my mind. So I would pull up the lyrics if I could find them, or if not, I'd just listen to them. And I'd be like, okay, what did you say? I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load. I've got 7 women on my mind. And I would just have to take it phrase by phrase, or sometimes just a portion of something. So I'd be like, okay, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load. And I would just repeat that over and over just to get it to stick. If I was looking at the lyrics, I would look away. I did not teach myself to read the lyrics and sing it. That doesn't work for me because puts my brain in a different mode. I'm reading what's on the page. I'm taking cues from the page. I'm not using my mind to recall something. So I would look at the page. Okay, running down the road trying to loosen my load. And then I would look away from the page. And I'd be like, running down the road trying to loosen my load. Running down the road trying to loosen my load. Over and over until I got it. what's the next part? I've got 7 women on my mind. Again, I would just repeat that over and over without looking at the lyrics, put it all together, running down the road, trying to loosen my load. I've got 7 women on my mind. Over and over until I stop thinking about it. It just becomes a muscle memory thing. You know, in the same way you have muscle memory with your fingers, you have muscle memory with all the muscles that are in your throat and that make your voice work, and your mouth and that sort of thing. Then usually I would have to think about putting that together with my guitar part. So that would be like, okay, where are these words landing on the chord changes? You know, running down the road, trying to loosen my load. I've got 7 women on my mind. So I'm thinking about going down on that G chord, 7 women, down on a D chord, on my mind. That lines up right there, so I want to get that to connect. 7 women on my mind. 7 women on my mind. Over and over until I get the feel of it. And for me, there's something about how the muscle memory when I'm singing connects with the muscle memory when I'm playing, and those things go together. Like today, someone might ask me, do you know the lyrics to this song? I'm like, no, but I used to play that. And if I pick up my guitar and start strumming, then the words come to me because I think it's muscle memory. And all of a sudden I realize, wait, what is it? It's 7 women on my mind. It comes to me when the guitar's in my hand because that's how I learned it and played it. And there's a connection there. And then you got to pay attention to when things don't land on the beat. So like the next part, 7 women on my mind. 4 that want to own me, 2 that want to stone me, 1 says she's a friend of mine. So that next line there, which I'd have to learn the same way, just, repeat it over and over without looking at the lyrics and memorize it. Those phrases come in before the downstroke. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 4 that wanna own me, 2 that wanna stone me, 1 says she's a friend of mine. Mine too. I'm feeling that come on the upstroke before the chord changes. 4 that wanna own me, 2 that wanna stone me, 1 says she's a friend of mine. So I pay attention to little things like that so I can get the lyrics to fall over the strumming in the correct places. And I would just run it down and run it down and run it down. I never liked performing songs with lyric sheets in front of me because if I had not memorized it and gotten the feel for it that way, then having the lyric sheets in front of me sometimes didn't help because I wasn't sure how to put it together. I couldn't remember, I see the lyrics there, but I didn't know what the vocal melody was. Does it go up? Does it go down here? Is this on the beat or is this off the beat? So when I would work all that stuff out, well, then I would end up memorizing the lyrics. So then I didn't need the lyric sheets. So I never used lyric sheets when I performed live because I just knew I had to get myself in a different frame of mind where I had things memorized and I knew the vocal melody and I knew how everything fit with the strumming. And, well, that's how I did that, Alan. I hope that helps. And I'm going to take a quick break here, and then we'll come back with more questions. All right, we are back. And our next question comes from Walter, and he says, conceptually, I understand intervals. Playing them is a completely different story. My head knows that on the fretboard, the notes in the major scale ascend, whole step, half, whole step, half, and that the chords ascend in the major scale as major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, minor, flat 5, and so on. But putting these two concepts together into practice seems beyond me. I'm looking for a unifying theory. Is there one? Maybe you have some additional study material I could turn to. Any suggestions? I'm seriously stalled here. Well, first of all, Walter, sounds like you might be a good candidate for the Zoom class that I'm actually running right now. I finalize it this week, called Music Theory 101, where I get into some traditional stuff that I kind of left out of fretboard theory. So maybe it sounds like you're someone that might want to explore that. So pay attention the next time when I offer that Zoom class. It's a 6-week class. We meet for an hour a week, and we talk music theory, and I provide you with some materials and stuff. And so, all right. So let me, I'm not sure I really understand your question as I switch guitars here. By the way, I'm playing my PRS DGT. It's got Seymour Duncan APH1 pickups in it. I'm playing through my Kemper profiling amplifier using a profile of a Tweed Deluxe amplifier. So intervals, which I cover in the Music Theory 101, is the way that we measure distances between notes. The major scale is the unit of measure in music. So the distance between its first and second note is a whole step, or it's a second interval. The distance between its first and third note is 2 whole steps, or it's a third interval. You can say 2 whole steps, or you can say a third. That just measures that distance, and so on. The distance between its root and fourth is a fourth interval. Fifth interval is next. Sixth. Seventh. And then finally, an eighth, which is just a unison pitch. It's an octave. So what I did in the class is we went through just some different scale patterns around the fretboard and just reviewed the intervals to see what it looks like on the fretboard to play, a sixth in different positions. You can't tell, but I fretted that differently. And so we see that distance as being a sixth. So that's how we measure distances in music, and then we use those intervals to describe the formula for scales or the construction of chords. So if I play a C major chord, it's made up of the notes C, E, and G, and that's a root, third, and fifth, because the distance from C to E is a third, and the distance between C and G is a fifth. So getting to know intervals is learning the lingo of music. That's how we communicate and describe things. Just like if you're a carpenter, you're going to talk about inches, feet, millimeters, depending on what country you're in. You got to know how to communicate distances and stuff like that. That's what we do in music, If I play an D minor chord, I see, okay, well, I have a root, a flat third. It's 1 fret lower than what a major third looks like. We call that a flat third or a minor third. It also has a fifth. And so on. So that's how we describe chord construction. If I go through the major scale, the first chord is C. It's got a root, third, fifth. Second chord is D minor. Root, minor, third, fifth. Next is E minor, root, minor, third, fifth. Next is F, root, third. I can say major third, or I can just say third. That implies major, root, third, fifth, and so on. If I play a C major 7 chord, why is it called C major 7? Well, because it's got a root, third, fifth, and it's got a 7 in there. And so on. So, in order to understand chord names, when you start having names that's like, sus2, sus4, major 7, 6, add 9, 13, blah, 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 all this different stuff, you figure that out because it's all based on intervals and it's based on degrees in the scale and stuff like that. So that's why it's important to understand intervals so you can understand chord names. It's also how we understand scale formulas too. If I play the D Dorian mode, that's formula is 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7. What's the difference between D Dorian mode and just the plain D natural minor? Well, the D Dorian mode has a major sixth, but the D natural minor would have a flat sixth. That's how we understand the difference in the scales and why it sounds different, because its interval structure is different. Now, that may not actually have been Walter's question. I'm not sure. I think he's talking about, well, how do we use this? How do we put it into practice? We would also use intervals to play parts. So think about the Brown-Eyed Girl by Van Morrison. So I'm playing up a G major scale, 2 notes at a time, playing double stops. That's what we call that. And the next note is a third above. So I'm taking the first note in the G scale, G, and the third note, B, and playing them together. That's a third interval. And then I'm climbing up the scale, and I'm with the notes always a third apart. Next, the chord goes to C, and instead of staying in the same scale, the lead part just switches to the C scale and plays thirds up the C scale. You put it together. Oops. Play some different intervals over the D. But this is an example of playing in thirds, very common on the guitar. Later in the same song, you have stuff like, as it's going through the changes, it's kind of arpeggiating chords, and it does stuff like this. Those are sixth intervals. I'm playing notes that are 6 scale degrees apart. The distances, we measure that in music, it's called a sixth. So that's a great example of using sixth intervals. If we play power chord songs, we're playing just roots and fifths. That's an example of playing intervals, So I do talk about this in my guitar theory courses and stuff. I introduce the concept of intervals, and I talk about songs that have very familiar riffs or hooks or something that's based on a particular interval. So learn those songs, and I think you'll understand over time how intervals are used. We are moving on. This next comment comes from Joseph, and he says, I wanted to say again that I love your podcast, and I also recently purchased your guitar picking mechanics course. As I was walking this morning, I listened to the first 45 minutes of your talk with Scott Sheriff. He's talking about episode 147. That was Scott's first time on the podcast. It's a fantastic episode that's full of useful information and terrific anecdotes. One thing that stuck out to me is your conversation about backing vocals. I've never considered myself a singer, and I haven't played in front of an audience for nearly 30 years. Like you, I felt like I was a guitar player and did my best in that role. However, now that I've picked up my guitar again after a long break, I'd love to try an open mic night or coffee house or something like that. You mentioned that you took your singing seriously when you realized you could be a more versatile band member by adding that skill. I'd love to hear about your part, about that part of your growth and what you looked for in a voice teacher. There is surely no shortage of great instructors in the Nashville area. I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and I'm considering a session or two just to evaluate my potential. He goes on to say, and as a side note, singing and playing is another component to performing. My goodness, I see Rush's Geddy Lee playing complicated lines on his bass, along with equally complicated timings, all the while singing melodies. Do you think this is a learnable skill, or are some just born with 2 brains? Haha. Thanks for all you do, and I really connect with your teaching style and materials. I am working my way through the fretboard theory books, and in the 2 years since I picked up my guitar, again, I am a better player with much more theory knowledge. That's in large part to you. Well, thanks, Joseph. That's great. I'm so glad that my instruction's working for you. And yeah, you're right. Geddy Lee is a phenomenal bass player, and he's also a fantastic singer. His voice is kind of an acquired taste, but you think about how that Geddy Lee also composed all of those vocal melodies and stuff, and they're not easy to sing. And then you combine them with his bass lines, which are oftentimes very technical and a lot going on with the timing there. So I have heard in interviews with Geddy Lee that's something that he did practice and worked a lot on. I recently watched some interviews with members of the Police who were interviewed by Rick Beato. And Stuart Copeland, the drummer, talked about how Sting worked very hard on playing and singing his bass lines. That in the studio, when they were tracking things, he would focus on the bass, and he would just kind of have a placeholder vocal here and there just to guide the band. But then he would record his vocals separately, but then he would have to woodshed at home and really work on combining those two parts so that he could do them both faithful to the recording without compromising anything. And I played in bands for years, and that was something I had to work on as well. And it's something that I really liked that and enjoyed that challenge. And so I was often the guy that people passed vocal parts onto because they got frustrated with trying to play or sing it. And I'd be like, well, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. So the question is that something that are some people just born with two brains, or is it a learnable skill? I would say both. For me, I noticed that I had the ability to learn it if I practiced. I just demonstrated that earlier as I was singing a portion of Take It Easy by the Eagles, and I pointed out how sometimes the words land right on the downbeat or a downstrum, and sometimes they come on an upbeat or upstrum before a downbeat. So I'm aware of that. I had to learn that to make sure I put things together correctly. There are some people that I played with that were good on an instrument or good singing, but for one reason or another, they just couldn't put things together and they kind of lacked the ability to learn that, and I don't know, maybe they just gave up. They're just not used to that, which probably is the case because, I've noticed that like some of the best singers that I, played with over the years oftentimes were the most untrained. They just had the most natural talent, and so they kind of went with what felt natural. That's true with some musicians too. I mean, there is such a thing as natural talent. Some people do have a knack for it. It is a gift. I remember reading the Old Testament, and I can't remember where, but it talked about how God had specifically gifted some people with certain skills in the arts or music or something like that. And I just thought that was interesting because there's certainly, we kind of stand in awe when people seem to have natural gifts and stuff. And people, let's be real. People do have natural gifts. People study and practice, and they learn how to refine their skills and maximize their potential. But there are some people that can open up their mouth at a young age without any training, and they sing like a bird and sound great. That was not me. So anyway, I'm digressing here, but there are some people that have a natural talent for this sort of thing, and I would be one of them, because as I was faced with some of these challenges, I'm like, wait a minute, and I started to think about it, and I thought, okay, well, this word falls on this strum, and then I come up, but then the next word is here, and then I would practice it, and then I would get the feel for it. Just like the way that a piano player has to coordinate two hands. It's not that one hand is operating independently from the other. They think about how everything syncs up and lines up together. That's how they're seeing things in notation, right? You've got the treble and the bass clef over each other, so they see when notes line up or when they're opposite each other, that sort of thing. So I realized that I could do the same thing with my playing and singing, but I think that realization and that desire to analyze things that way and work things out may be a skill all in its own, because over the years playing in bands, I realized that most people just didn't want to bother with that. They didn't want to learn, So you can learn it. I don't know that you're going to be as good as a Geddy Lee. Geddy Lee's a very, very talented musician, maybe the most talented musician in Rush. People, often pay attention to, we pay attention to the guitar player because we're guitar players. And of course, Neil Peart is considered this like drum god, and everything. But I mean, Geddy Lee was so skilled at the bass. He did all the keys and stuff like that. And then he had to take all of these lyrics written by Peart and figure out how to turn them into melodies and fit them over these unusual compositions that they had. And then he had to perform all that stuff live, oftentimes singing, playing bass and keys and operating pedals with his feet. So there's no question that Geddy Lee is a very gifted person who then worked very hard on his gifting and, maximized his potential and refined his skills. Now, as far as the first part of the question here, like what was my journey to singing? So when I kind of put my first band together back in my hometown of Toledo, Ohio, it was a cover band, and at the time, there was quite a vibrant scene there where you had these really popular clubs around Toledo and Detroit, and the format is that you had cover bands that would play dance music and stuff like that. And I always scoffed at the idea of playing in one of those bands because I just wasn't into that sort of thing. I was into Rush and a bunch of nerdy guitar music and stuff like that. But then I went out and saw someone play, and they were so good, and there was so much energy in the room, and people were having so much fun, and I was so impressed with how well the band played, and they sang so well together, and they were singing harmony and all this stuff, and they were making good money too. And I thought, gosh, I think I just overlooked, I overlooked this here, and so I wanted to get a band together, and so I did, and found someone to play drums and keys and bass, and I got a lead singer, and I learned all the guitar parts, and I thought, we're going to sound great. And in one of our first rehearsals, the lead singer kind of looked around and said, hey, you guys all sound good on your instruments and everything, but who's going to sing all the backup vocals? Because, of course, these pop songs we were singing are just loaded with backup vocals. And I was like, I didn't think about that. I was like, okay, he's right. There's tons of backup vocals here. So I was so committed to being a musician and making a living and getting this band together and stuff that I said, okay, I'll work on this. Other members of the band did as well. And I really struggled with it because I was not a natural singer. I never paid attention to singing. I had tunnel vision and would just focus on instrumentation and stuff like that. But I just started doing it and, working out the harmony parts on guitar and, figuring out what they were and singing them. And I had to get some feedback from the other band members that said, you sound terrible, you're not singing this right, you're not pronouncing this right. And eventually I thought, okay, let me get some lessons. So, I tried taking some lessons from a few different instructors, one from the University of Toledo, who was focus was more like classical repertoire and stuff like that. But I did join the men's choir at the University of Toledo for a semester and participated in all of the classes and rehearsals and the shows just to sing. And, I had to learn a part and sing with, wasn't really the pop genre, but I don't know, maybe it helped. But then I was also referred to a guy in Detroit, Michigan named Ray Taylor. I'd be real surprised if he's still alive. And Ray Taylor was worked with people who taught pop singers. And so he taught me about diction and stuff like that because I just didn't think about that. And, when we sing words like fire, we typically don't say fire. We take the R out. We say fire, Think about Jimi Hendrix's song Fire, Let me stand next to your fire. No. Let me stand next to your fire. And I was like, oh, yeah, fire. You take the R out. And so he helped me with diction and pointing out stuff that was obvious to most people, but not me. Gave me some breathing exercises, explained how you can't just wait, just take a quick breath like that before a line. You got to really fill your diaphragm, keep it filled, be aware of always taking air in when you have an opportunity so that you always have air there and stuff like that. And I really just focused on listening more carefully to the vocals and songs and just trying to mimic what I heard. And ended up getting good enough at it that I could be a good contributor in a band. I could be relied on to play, to sing harmonies, and I even would sing some songs. I eventually just started singing and would do solo stuff, one-man stuff. And I don't have a great singing voice. I say there are singers and there are people who sing. Some people open up their mouth and you're like, you're a singer. Other people, you wouldn't say that about them, but they can sing. So I'm someone who can sing. I can mostly be on pitch. And when you're doing covers and stuff like that, if people really, really want to hear a popular song, as long as you're in the ballpark and you don't sound like, a broken record or something like that, then and the rest of the music is fine, then people think you sound great because they love the song and it's live. And, I never got into recording my voice except for some backups on stuff. And I never sang in church either, because in church it's just a different setting and you're so exposed and I just don't have a voice for that sort of thing. You want me to belt out Roadhouse Blues at midnight on a Saturday? Sure. I could do that, because how good do you need to be to do that? Not take anything away from Jim Morrison. He was great, but if you're just doing a cover version of that. So yeah, I just paid attention to it, worked hard at it, listened carefully. I got a good ear for music, so I listened carefully to those harmony vocals and worked them out on the guitar and figured out, okay, what's the chord progression here? What chord are they on? Because sometimes it was hard for me to hear, like, what is the harmony? And it's like, oh, okay, so the lead line is on the root. Oh, okay, I'm on the third. Of course, I'm on the third. And I would oftentimes work out the harmony parts on guitar, and then I would review them that way. I worked really hard at it. But eventually, over time, as I performed those songs over and over, because I played a lot in the bands, I got them down and I just heard them, and I could just go to them and got really good and became a very reliable person who would learn those backup parts, would be there and figured out, in most cases, figured out how I could play my guitar parts and sing the backup parts at the same time. We got time for one more question, folks. This comes from Paul, and he says, I am in a gigging band and considering the jump to modeling profiling for my pedals. The choices are, of course, the Kemper, the Neuroquad Cortex, the Line 6 Helix, and the new Fender One, Fender One Master option? No, Tone Master. I think that's the typo. Fender Tone Master. I would love to hear your thoughts. Well, here's the deal, Paul, and for everyone else listening, you really can't go wrong with either option. They're all essentially the same thing at this point. They offer different amp sounds with different built-in effects, and you can, create presets and save them to foot switches. And, we can split hairs about the tone differences, but what really comes down to is how much money do you want to spend, the shape and the size of the unit, which interface you prefer to use. So most tone snobs will probably say they prefer the sound of the Kemper or maybe the Fractal system. But they're just, they're so close, and in a mix and in a live situation, other people would say it really doesn't matter. So some people might say, yeah, I think the Kemper sounds a little more natural than the Helix, but they'll say, but I like the Helix because it was less expensive, or I like its interface, it's easier to use, and it sounds so good that, the difference in sound is just kind of insignificant. So there's lots of different reasons why people would choose one or the other. I use the Kemper, and just because I bought one years ago and liked it and got used to it and never really wanted to mess with something else. I really like the sound of it, and I like its options. I like that I can switch between all my sounds using the Kemper remote floorboard, and I don't need to add any other pedals if I don't want. Some people want to use their own pedals, though. So they might use some of their effects or overdrives, and then they'll just get like a smaller amp emulator pedal to put at the end of their signal chain. So they want to use their regular pedal board as if they're going into an amp, but they don't want to go to an amp. Some people don't want that. They want something that's all in one unit. So you have to just kind of figure out, I don't know, what do you want? What are you going after? You can make any of them sound good. So I don't think that anyone needs to think, oh, if I choose something less than, the Kemper or less than this or less than that, I'm going to sacrifice tone. They all sound good and getting to the point where they're probably going to be indistinguishable. Although my ears can still hear a difference between line 6 and like Kemper, and I prefer the Kemper, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just hearing things. I don't know. I play the Kemper all the time, so I'm kind of used to it. Anyway, Paul replied, and he said, I need clean, mild overdrive, and full overdrive. Think Allman Brothers and Santana. I also need chorus, delay, and compression. I want one unit to replace my pedal board. Okay, so he doesn't want to use his pedal board. He wants one unit. So I'm not an expert on all the options, but based on Paul's needs here, he might actually consider the Line 6 Helix Stomp. So it's going to give you some amp modeling in there. It's going to give you some of the effects that he needs, chorus, delay, and compression. And it'll give you a couple of presets with the foot switches, so you could have your clean, your mild overdrive, and your full overdrive. I know someone that uses that pedal and sounded great, and they just set up a few different basic sounds like that, and it worked. So some people want a larger unit because they need more functionality because they're creating more and more presets. And so they don't want just a few presets, they need several. Maybe they want banks of presets because they're going to be creating multiple presets for each song. So like some people in church will have the whole bank with all these presets for one particular worship song. And here's the intro, verse, chorus, lead, outro, and they're dialing everything in because they're trying to maybe recreate the part specifically from the original recording or something. And they like that, and they like that they can customize all the presets and the sounds and the effects for a whole song and all the parts of a song, and they can bank up to another song and so on. Or they want to create multiple banks of sounds because they use one for their Les Paul and one for their Telecaster, and where they've tweaked things, for the guitar that they're using. And some people just love more options. They like to stack effects. They want to use multiple delays and, all this stuff. And other people just want to keep it simple. Typically, when I would play at church, even though these worship guitar parts can get quite intricate with the effects and everything, I usually don't attempt to try to recreate the recordings. I say, okay, I see what they're doing here. I'm going to use I usually just have a few sounds that I use that where I can fill space in a similar manner without having to focus, on recreating the sound specifically. It's typically not necessary. That's not really what we're doing at my church, is trying to recreate things. But I do need to play in an appropriate style and have sounds that fill space in an appropriate manner. But I usually try to keep it simple. All right, podcast 157 is a wrap. If you have questions you would like for me to answer in future podcast episodes, just head over to guitarmusictheory.com, scroll down, and click on the contact link. And while you're there, if you're not already enrolled in a free video course, answer that question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that's calibrated to your current level. I can help you with learning the basics, or bar chords, finger picking, lead guitar, worship music, and of course, I can certainly help you delve deeply into music theory. So get enrolled in your free video course today at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. My books, such as Fretboard Theory Volume 2, Guitar Picking Mechanics, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Rhythm and Technique for Dummies, and more, are all available at Amazon.com. If you're interested in PDF ebook copies of Fretboard Theory, they are available for sale on my website under the Courses tab. Next week, I'm beginning a new series of Zoom group classes called Lead Guitar Improv 101. This is for players who are beyond the basics, familiar with scale patterns and their basic use, but you need help learning how to improvise. I'll show you how to take riffs and licks and phrases from familiar songs and use them as themes in your own improvisation. This will enable you to start playing musically and expressing yourself in a manner similar to the music you're listening to, so you don't sound like you're just playing up and down scales. You can enroll in this class by going to my website and clicking on the Zoom Lessons tab. And if you would like more information, you can reach out to me. All right, guitar engineers, thanks for listening. I'm Desi Cerna. Before you go, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and leave me a positive review if you can. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.